The conclusion of World War II formalizes the opposition between the Western powers and the Soviet bloc of nations. While some literature participated in this ideological conflict, much writing retreated in dismay from the political sphere. This retreat from an objective reality reached a climax in philosophies such as phenomenology, which viewed the objective world as a function of perception. The foundations of phenomenology were laid by the German philosopher Edmund Husserl. This philosophy was then further extended by the philosophy of existentialism, which called into question not just the objective reality, but also all forms of authority and belief. In fact, Husserl's student Martin Heidegger proved to be the major modern exponent of existentialism. But existentialism didn't just start from modernity, it didn't start from the 20th century, but rather it started from this Danish philosopher known as Søren Kierkegaard in the mid-19th century. But what exactly is existentialism? The definition of existentialism is that humans define their own meaning in life and try to make rational decisions despite existing in an irrational universe. Existentialism is a theory that believes that man is what he does. It has 5 basic features. 1. Individuals define their own meaning and purpose through their actions and their choices. That means that they have individual freedom, and they have the responsibility that comes with making these choices individually. 2. There was an emphasis on personal experience and the importance of subjective reality in understanding human existence. 3. Life is inherently meaningless, and individuals must confront the absurdity of existence. 4. A sense of being estranged from society. 5. Living authentically, avoiding self-deception or conformity, but rather accepting your own freedom and its responsibility. Existentialism as a movement emerged against rationalism, idealism, positivism, and materialism. Rationalism emphasizing reason and logic as the primary means to understand the world. Positivism talks about how observable fact and scientific methods are the only way of knowing the world. Idealism believes that human life and consciousness are shaped by universal ideas. And materialism, which believes that material forces shape human existence. Theory of existentialism also does not believe on the existence of God. However, there is a type of existentialism that do so. It's called Christian existentialism. The characters then find meaning in religion that offers them not only a purpose of life, but also explains the origins of the universe, divine rules of conduct, and a possibility of reward. This we see in the philosophy of Søren Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard is considered to be the father of existentialism, and he introduced key existential concepts such as subjectivity, subjective reality, and authenticity, living authentically. So these 2 features out of the basic 5 features come from Kierkegaard directly. He talks about the leap of faith. He argued that reason cannot explain the relationship between the individual and God, and therefore you need a leap of faith. In simpler terms, it would mean that you would not take into account reason when it comes to believing God. You just let reason go and simply believe. That is leap of faith. Kierkegaard also wrote about how anxiety and despair arise when we confront that gap between our finite existence and the infinite divine realm that doesn't seem to make sense to human world or human instinct. This arises within humans, the death instinct, pessimism, that the world doesn't make sense, so it's important for us to remove ourselves from this world. These conditions arise when we believe in God, when we have a religion to lean back towards. But what if you have no religion? What if you don't believe in God? The human impulse is to establish for one's own self a raison d'être, and to rationalize one's often painful and difficult existence. The lack of God leaves any justification of existence. The modern person therefore finds himself or herself in an absurd world, which seems to be an endless and purposeless repetition of the same. This condition we see in the theory of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. His philosophy is called nihilism. He proclaimed that traditional religious beliefs no longer served the foundation for moral or existential guidance in the modern world. In other words, he declared that God is dead, which meant that now you had to exercise your own will to power. That is, your desire to assert and enhance your own strength and influence over others. He introduced the concept of eternal recurrence, suggesting that life may repeat infinitely, and thus we should live as though we would relive our actions forever. Out of all of us, a few would become the Übermensch, the overman, the one who transcends traditional moral codes and create their own values, like Napoleon. So his belief was that life lacks inherent meaning, value, or purpose. Pessimism that was practiced by Kierkegaard was a step ahead. He believed that yes, life lacks inherent meaning, value, or purpose, and therefore it's not worth living. Existentialism stands on the other end of the spectrum. It's important to believe that nihilism is not a part of existentialism. But existentialism acknowledges the nihilistic condition and proposes a way to overcome this condition. Existentialism offers a way to create personal meaning and purpose through individual choice and action. So yes, life is meaningless, but you can still find meaning in that by exercising your free will. Then came Heidegger. Heidegger focused on being and the nature of human existence. Being refers to how individuals experience their existence. And from this concept comes Dasein, which literally means being there. It refers to how human beings are the only species who are conscious of their own existence and who can question the meaning of their being, their experiences in this world. So basically, human beings are the only ones that can have an existential crisis. From here comes his concept of being towards death. He argued that to understand life, you must confront your own mortality, and only by accepting your own death you can live authentically. You can accept the responsibility for your own life without conforming to social norms. Another of his important concepts is being in the world, which he also calls temporality. Heidegger sees temporality as that fundamental structure of Dasein. Time is not a linear progression, but an aesthetic structure comprising three dimensions: past, present, and future. Heidegger argues that our being is fundamentally temporal. We are beings who are always already in time, thrown into a world with a past, present, and future. Our existence is characterized by a sense of finitude, an awareness of our mortality. This awareness of death, according to Heidegger, is not something to be feared but a source of authenticity. It compels us to live in the present, to make the most of our finite time. In essence, for Heidegger, time is not something that we experience, but something that we are. Our existence is a temporal project, a process of becoming that is always already unfolding in time. So, to recap what Heidegger is trying to tell us, we are beings that are conscious of our existence, and we can question our very own existence. But when we do question our existence, we try to place ourselves in time, because all of our experiences and our existence on its own is placed in time. And since everything is placed in time, we need to be more aware of how time for us is finite. That is, one day our existence will end, and we will die. This understanding of our death is what can make us live authentically. Because then, when we're not afraid of death anymore, we're able to live in the moment, and we are able to enjoy the experience of life, because we know it's limited, and we know it will end. This is where we don't care about conforming to social norms, but rather, we're able to focus on our own existence and live authentically. So, Søren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Martin Heidegger are the three early 19th century philosophers of existentialism. Coming to the late 19th century, we have Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre believes that human beings are entirely responsible for creating meaning in an indifferent world. He echoes Heidegger when he talks about his concept of bad faith, which is a form of self-deception where individuals avoid the responsibility of making choices by conforming to societal expectations and therefore living inauthentically. He gave the idea of existence preceding essence. That is, humans are not born with a predefined purpose or essence. They must define themselves through their actions. They are radically free, and therefore with this freedom, there will come the burden of responsibility. Now this idea would then be taken over by Albert Camus. Camus argues that in facing life's absurdity, humans should rebel against the meaningless by creating their own meaning. For exemplifying this, he uses the myth of Sisyphus, where he talks about how Sisyphus finds meaning despite the absurdity of his task, to endlessly roll a boulder up a hill. For those of you who do not know about the myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus was a man who was condemned by the gods to endlessly roll a boulder up a hill. If you look it up on Google, you will probably find more about the book The Myth of Sisyphus, which was written by Albert Camus. But he has taken this title from a Greek myth, which is seen as a metaphor for the absurd human condition of following a routine, the same routine every single day, of nothing ever changing in life and you repeating the same things again and again and again. He also gives the idea of the absurd hero, that is someone who confronts the meaninglessness of life without despair, accepting the absurd condition without resigning to nihilism. Now that you know about the individual philosophies of these philosophers, let's take a seat back, look at all of these philosophies from a vantage point, and finally see what all of them were collectively trying to tell us. Nihilism means nothing. It determines that humans existing in this world is enough. They should not do anything because everything they do is meaningless. It does not believe in the existence of God. To take this subsequent leap of faith strips them of a purpose of existence, sometimes to the levels of suicide. But Camus believed that a meaningless life is worth living if we are aware of the absurd contradiction between the human craving for meaning and the universe's negligence in providing one. To Camus and Nietzsche, one must hold a nihilistic view of the world, that is, life holds no intrinsic value, and yet reject pessimism, which means that life is not worth living. According to Heidegger, nothing is that which makes possible the concept, and hence the discernible existence of all things, which is not to say that which is opposite of beings or things, but rather that which lies outside and thus transcends beings or things. If habit is a second nature, it keeps us in ignorance of the first. Routine hides the human nothingness which is integral to all existence. In Waiting for Godot by Beckett, you will see the Heraclitean flux, which is the idea that everything is in a constant state of change and nothing can ever be in the same state twice. Action repeats, but not quite exactly, as the spiral comes around to the same position but never in the same place. It is the slight shift of the spiral, wherein lies the possibility of change. According to existentialist thought, it is the loss of identity that causes mankind's helplessness. That is why existentialists emphasize giving one's life a purpose. Existentialism encompasses the belief that eternal repetition is the only way for something to have meaning. Thus, typical existentialists would believe that their eternal return is the path to meaning. However, they do not realize that they only find meaning eternal return because they're looking for meaning in the eternal return. This is existentialism, a flight from reality. This flight from reality found voice also in literary developments, such as the theater of the absurd, whose major proponents, Samuel Beckett and Eugene Ionesco, dramatized the existential absurdity, anguish, and ultimate isolation of human existence in their place. I talk more about Samuel Beckett and the theater of the absurd in this lecture. Beside existentialist theater, we also had a lot of other things going on across the world, especially in Europe. I'm talking about the Beat Generation in America and the Angry Young Man movement in England. I'll be talking about these in detail in this lecture.